Welcome back to Snooze Philosophy, where we gently unearth the profound wisdom often obscured by the rush of modern life. Today, we embark on a journey through time, back to the sun-drenched stoas and bustling marketplaces of ancient Greece, to trace the very roots of a philosophy that continues to resonate deeply with seekers of tranquility and resilience. Stoicism, our focus is on the roots of resilience, origins and evolution of Stoic thought. Imagine, if you will, the world as it was in the late 4th century BCE. Alexander the Great's empire, once a dazzling, unified vision, had fractured into a mosaic of warring kingdoms. The grand city-states, the polis that had defined Greek identity for centuries, saw their autonomy diminished. Athens, though still a center of learning and culture, had lost its preeminent political power. This was a period of immense geopolitical upheaval, uncertainty, and a profound sense of individual displacement. Where once a citizen might find meaning in the collective life of their city, now there was a vacuum, a yearning for personal stability in a world that felt increasingly chaotic and indifferent. It was into this crucible of uncertainty that Zeno of Citium, a Phoenician merchant, stumbled upon philosophy. The story, often recounted, tells of Zeno's shipwreck near Athens, a devastating loss that ironically became his turning point. Stripped of his material wealth, he found himself in a bookshop, reading Xenophon's Memorabilia, a work about Socrates. Deeply inspired by Socrates' unwavering self-sufficiency and moral clarity amidst adversity, Zeno asked the bookseller where he might find such a man today. The bookseller, pointing to the cynic philosopher Crates passing by, replied, "Follow that man." This anecdote is more than just a charming origin story. It encapsulates the very essence of the period's philosophical quest. Zeno, a man of practical affairs, sought not abstract theories but a way of life, a path to wisdom that could withstand the capricious turns of fortune. He found an initial guide in Cynicism, a school of thought founded by Antisthenes and championed by Diogenes of Sinope, which advocated for a radical return to nature, a rejection of societal conventions, and absolute self-sufficiency. The Cynics were known for their stark austerity and often provocative disregard for social norms, embodying a fierce independence of spirit. Zeno, while deeply influenced by their emphasis on virtue and indifference to externals, recognized that their methods, while powerful, might be too extreme, perhaps even too individualistic, for the nuanced realities of human community. He appreciated their freedom but sought a more refined, systematic approach. After studying under various philosophers, including Crates and the Megarian Diodorus Cronus, Zeno began teaching his own philosophy around 300 BCE. He chose a public colonnade in the Athenian agora, known as the Stoa Poikile or Painted Porch, adorned with murals depicting battles and myths. This location, open to all, lent its name to his emerging school, Stoicism. It was a philosophy for everyone, not just the cloistered elite. The early Stoa, defined by Zeno himself, followed by his brilliant successors Cleanthes and especially Chrysippus, was remarkably comprehensive. Unlike many modern interpretations that reduce Stoicism primarily to a set of ethical maxims, the early Stoics conceived of philosophy as a unified organism with three interconnected parts: logic, physics, and ethics. Chrysippus, often called the second founder of Stoicism due to his immense systematization, famously used analogies to illustrate this interconnectedness. Philosophy, he said, was like an orchard, with logic as the protective fence, physics as the fertile soil, and ethics as the delicious fruit. Or alternatively, it was like an egg. The shell is logic, the white is physics, and the yolk, the nourishing core, is ethics. This illustrates a crucial point. Stoic ethics, the practical wisdom we often associate with the philosophy, was not standalone. It was deeply rooted in their understanding of the cosmos and their rigorous approach to reason. Let's delve into these foundational pillars, starting with physics. For the Stoics, the universe was not a random, chaotic place, but a rational, ordered whole. This belief was heavily influenced by pre-Socratic thinkers, particularly Heraclitus of Ephesus, who famously declared that all things come to pass in accordance with logos. The Stoics adopted and expanded upon this concept of logos, understanding it as the universal organizing principle, an active, immanent reason pervading and structuring the entire cosmos. This logos was not a transcendent deity, separate from the world, but rather the very fabric of reality itself, akin to an intelligent, divine fire. This cosmic reason manifested physically as pneuma, a sort of fiery breath or intelligent spirit that permeated all matter, giving it form, coherence, and life. The Stoics believed that everything that exists is material, including the soul and even God, logos. The pneuma acted as a tension, tonos, holding things together, guiding their development according to the dictates of logos. From the simplest stone to the most complex human being, everything operates according to this rational order. This meant that the universe was deterministic. Every event unfolded according to a causal chain initiated by the Logos. There was no room for pure chance. This deterministic view often raises questions about human freedom. If everything is fated, how can we be responsible for our actions? Chrysippus, with his formidable logical prowess, tackled this head-on with an ingenious analogy. Imagine a cylinder or a cone. If you push it, it will roll. The push is the external cause, but how it rolls, its natural propensity to roll, comes from its own shape, its internal constitution. Similarly, external events might provide the push, but our assent to impressions, our internal judgment and response, is our own. This internal capacity for judgment, for assenting to or rejecting impressions, is where our freedom lies. We cannot control the external events that happen to us, but we can control how we interpret and react to them. This pivotal insight forms the bedrock of Stoic ethics. Next, we move to logic, the protective fence of their philosophical garden. For the early Stoics, logic was far more than just abstract rules of reasoning. It encompassed epistemology, theory of knowledge, rhetoric, and grammar. They sought a firm basis for knowledge, a criterion of truth that could distinguish genuine understanding from mere opinion. They posited that certain impressions, when perceived clearly and vividly, were cataleptic or apprehensive, meaning they grasped reality directly and were compelling enough to command assent. These were the building blocks of knowledge. Chrysippus, in particular, was a prodigious logician. It is said he wrote over 700 books, many of them on logic, and that if the gods had a logic, it would be Chrysippus's. He developed a highly sophisticated system of propositional logic, exploring conditional statements, disjunctions, and conjunctions, anticipating aspects of modern logic by 2 millennia. He also delighted in solving and even creating logical paradoxes to hone the minds of his students and defend Stoicism from critics. For instance, the liar paradox, this statement is false, and the Sorites paradox, how many grains of sand make a heap, were grist for the Stoic mill. Their mastery of logic was essential for navigating the complex arguments of rival schools and for ensuring that their ethical conclusions were rationally sound. Finally, we arrive at the juicy fruit, ethics. This was the ultimate purpose of all Stoic philosophy, to live a good, flourishing life, known as eudaimonia. Given their understanding of the universe as rational and deterministic, governed by logos, the Stoic ethical imperative naturally followed. Live in accordance with nature, and since human nature is defined by reason, to live in accordance with nature means to live in accordance with reason. This is the essence of virtue. Virtue, for the Stoics, was the sole good, the summum bonum. Everything else, health, wealth, reputation, pleasure, were considered indifference. They weren't inherently good or bad, their value depended entirely on how they were used. A rich person could be virtuous or vicious. Wealth itself made no difference to one's moral character. This radical claim set them apart. The goal was to cultivate the 4 cardinal virtues: wisdom, prudence, good judgment, courage, endurance, resilience, justice, fairness, benevolence, and temperance, self-control, moderation. A key concept here is oikeiosis, often translated as appropriation or familiarization. It describes the process by which living beings from birth naturally care for themselves and their well-being. For humans, this innate self-love gradually extends outwards, to family, friends, community, and eventually, to all of humanity, recognizing our shared rationality and common citizenship in the cosmos. This cosmopolitanism, the idea of being a citizen of the world, was a profound and revolutionary ethical stance in an era of tribal loyalties, fostering a sense of universal brotherhood and sisterhood. Zeno himself used the vivid analogy of a potter to explain virtue. Just as a potter's skill lies in the act of making a beautiful pot, not in the pot itself, which can break, so too does a virtuous person's good lie in the exercise of their virtue, their judgments, intentions, and actions, rather than in the external outcome, which is beyond their control. The external result is merely the clay, the indifferent material. The artistry lies in the internal process of creation. The early Stoa, particularly through Chrysippus, solidified these doctrines. They posited the ideal of the Stoic sage, a person who has achieved perfect virtue, living entirely in accordance with reason, free from passions, and utterly unperturbed by external events. This sage, though perhaps never fully attainable, served as a guiding star and aspirational model for all Stoics. They saw passions, pather, such as fear, desire, pleasure, and grief, not as natural emotions, but as destructive disturbances of the rational soul, stemming from erroneous judgments about what is good or bad. The goal was apatheia, not apathy in the modern sense of indifference, but freedom from irrational passions, a state of serene tranquility based on sound reason. As Stoicism gained prominence, it naturally attracted critics. One of the most significant challenges came from the skeptical school, particularly the academic skeptics like Arcesilaus and Carneades, who directly attacked the Stoic theory of knowledge. They questioned the very possibility of certainty, arguing that no impression could be so clear and compelling as to be definitively cataleptic. For every seemingly clear perception, they contended, a deceptive one could be found. How could one distinguish between a waking vision and a vivid dream, or between a genuine impression and a hallucination? If certainty was impossible, then the entire edifice of Stoic logic and, by extension, its ethics, which relied on making correct judgments, would collapse. This forced the Stoics to continually refine their epistemology, emphasizing the role of reason in evaluating impressions, not just their vividness. Another critique, one that has persisted through the ages, concerned the practical difficulty of the Stoic ethical framework. The ideal of the sage, perfectly rational and free from passions, seemed impossibly demanding for the common person. How could one truly eradicate grief or fear? Was it even desirable? Critics argued that such an ideal was inhuman, leading to a cold, unfeeling existence. While the Stoics did not advocate for a suppression of all emotions, only the irrational and destructive passions, the distinction could be subtle and difficult to maintain. The charge that early Stoicism was too abstract, too focused on intricate logical arguments and cosmological theories, also gained traction, suggesting it was distant from the daily struggles of ordinary people. This brings us to the Middle Stoa, a period of crucial transition and adaptation. As Rome's power grew and its influence spread, Greek philosophy began to travel westward. Key figures like Painted of Rhodes c. 185–109 BCE and Posidonius of Apamea c. 135–51 BCE were instrumental in bridging the Greek and Roman worlds. Painted in particular spent time in Rome and became friends with prominent Romans like Scipio Aemilianus, who brought Greek culture and learning to the Roman elite. Painted introduced a significant softening of some of the more rigid doctrines of the early Stoa. He de-emphasized the precise, often technical, logical debates and the intricate cosmological speculations, focusing instead on aspects of Stoicism that resonated more directly with Roman sensibilities. Practical ethics, duty, officium, and the cultivation of character for public service. He stressed the importance of social and political engagement, arguing that virtue found its fullest expression in contributing to the common good. He also conceded that certain indifferents, like health, wealth, and natural abilities, while not inherently good, were nevertheless preferred indifferents, progmena, making them worthy of pursuit if done virtuously. This was a move away from the starker asceticism of the early Stoa and the Cynics, making Stoicism more palatable and applicable to the active, civic-minded Roman aristocracy. Posidonius, a student of Painted, was a truly encyclopedic thinker, a polymath who made contributions to geography, history, astronomy, and ethnography, all viewed through a Stoic lens. He maintained the cosmic scope of Stoicism, integrating empirical observations and scientific knowledge into the philosophical system. He explored the concept of cosmic sympathy, the interconnectedness of all things in the universe, emphasizing how astronomical phenomena might influence earthly events. Posidonius also reevaluated the Stoic theory of emotions, suggesting that irrational impulses might have a distinct, non-rational source within the soul, not solely stemming from erroneous judgments. This made room for acknowledging the power of passions while still advocating for rational control. Their work demonstrated the adaptability of Stoicism, proving it could integrate diverse fields of knowledge and speak to a broader audience. The hard turn from abstract theoretical physics and logic to practical ethics and psychological self-help becomes most evident and pronounced in the late Stoa, the Roman Stoicism of the imperial era. Why this shift? Rome was a vast empire, a world of immense power and complexity. The philosophical needs of a Roman emperor, a wealthy statesman, or a former slave were different from those of a Greek philosopher debating precise definitions in the Athenian agora. For these Romans, philosophy was less about intellectual gymnastics and more about a guide to living well amidst political intrigue, personal tragedy, and the immense responsibilities of empire. They sought tools for navigating life's inevitable challenges, for finding inner peace in a tumultuous world. This period produced the most enduring and widely read Stoic texts. The letters and essays of Seneca the Younger, the discourses and enchiridion of Epictetus, and the meditations of Emperor Marcus Aurelius. These three figures, despite their vastly different social statuses, collectively represent the pinnacle of Stoic practical application. Lucius Annius Seneca, c. 4 BCE 65 CE, was a powerful statesman, advisor to Nero, and prolific writer. His philosophical essays and letters, like On the Shortness of Life, On Anger, On Providence, and On Tranquility of Mind, are replete with vivid imagery, rhetorical flair, and penetrating psychological insights. Seneca faced exile, political intrigue, and eventually forced suicide by Nero. His life was a testament to his philosophy, constantly testing its tenets. He focused heavily on overcoming negative emotions, preparing for adversity, and embracing death as a natural part of life. For Seneca, philosophy was a medicine for the soul, a practical toolkit for navigating the human condition. He eloquently explored the idea that fortune has no dominion over a virtuous mind, that true freedom lies in internal self-mastery. "No man is free who is a slave to the body," he wrote, "and all who seek honor or who set themselves in the power of money are slaves." His writings are a passionate plea for self-reflection and disciplined ethical practice. Epictetus, c. 5100 and 35 CE, offers a stark contrast in background. Born a slave, he gained his freedom and became a revered teacher of Stoicism, eventually establishing his own school. His teachings, preserved by his student Arrian in the Discourses and the concise Enchiridion handbook, emphasize the radical distinction between what is up to us, our judgments, desires, aversions, and actions, and what is not up to us, our body, possessions, reputation, and external events. This dichotomy of control is arguably the most fundamental and impactful Stoic teaching for practical application. "Some things are in our control and others are not," he declared. "The things in our control are opinion, pursuit, desire, aversion, and in a word, whatever are our own actions. The things not in our control are body, property, reputation, command, and in one word, whatever are not our own actions." This simple yet profound insight empowers individuals to focus their energy and attention solely on what they can genuinely influence, thereby achieving inner freedom and invulnerability to external misfortune. Epictetus lived a life of exemplary simplicity, embodying his philosophy with an unwavering commitment. His focus was intensely practical: how to live a good life here and now, regardless of one's external circumstances. Finally, we have Marcus Aurelius, 121–180 CE, the philosopher-emperor. His Meditations, a series of personal reflections and spiritual exercises never intended for publication, offer a unique window into the mind of a ruler grappling with the immense responsibilities of empire, constant warfare, illness, and personal loss, all while striving to live a virtuous life according to Stoic principles. Marcus reminded himself of the transient nature of life, the inevitability of change, and the importance of duty and service to humanity. His writings are a profound testament to the power of Stoicism as a guiding philosophy for practical leadership and personal resilience. He constantly sought to align his will with the cosmic logos, to accept what fate brought, and to act with justice and benevolence towards his fellow human beings. "Do not disturb yourself by picturing your entire life," he advises. "Don't let your thoughts range over all the various troubles which you have met and will meet, but in every present circumstance ask, what is there in this that is insupportable and beyond endurance?" His Meditations are a daily practice, a constant wrestling with human fallibility, and an aspiration towards the Stoic ideal. It is during this Roman period that Stoicism also found itself in fascinating dialogue and contrast with Epicureanism, another dominant Hellenistic philosophy. Both schools emerged from the same post-Alexandrian climate of uncertainty, offering paths to ataraxia, tranquility, and eudaimonia. However, their approaches were radically different. Epicurus taught that the highest good was pleasure, understood not as sensual indulgence but as aponia, freedom from pain in the body, and ataraxia, freedom from disturbance in the soul, achieved through simple living, friendship, and the absence of fear, especially of death and the gods. The Epicureans advocated for withdrawing from public life and cultivating a private garden of tranquility. Stoics, on the other hand, championed virtue as the sole good, duty, and active engagement with the world. Where Epicureans sought to minimize pain and maximize pleasure in a refined sense, Stoics sought to cultivate virtue regardless of pleasure or pain, embracing their duty and contributing to the cosmic order. Their contrasting responses to life's fundamental questions highlight the rich philosophical landscape of the era. Despite its enduring appeal, the practical implementation of Stoicism has always presented challenges. One persistent criticism, extending from the ancient skeptics to modern detractors, concerns the demanding nature of Stoic apathy. While the Stoics clarified that apatheia meant freedom from irrational passions, not an absence of all feeling or empathy, achieving this distinction is extraordinarily difficult. Can a person truly remain unperturbed by the suffering of a loved one or the injustice inflicted upon an innocent? Critics argued that such an ideal was either unattainable or, if achieved, would lead to a cold, emotionally detached individual, devoid of genuine human warmth. The difficulty for the common person lies in consistently applying the rigorous rational judgment required, particularly in moments of high emotional intensity. The aspiration to be a sage is admirable, but its perceived inaccessibility can be discouraging. Furthermore, while the hard turn to ethics in the Roman period made Stoicism more accessible, the intricate cosmological and logical frameworks of the early Stoa, particularly its deterministic physics and complex logic, were often seen as overly abstract and difficult for the average person to grasp or find immediate relevance in. For someone struggling with debt, grief, or political persecution, understanding the nuances of pneuma or propositional logic might have seemed like a luxury, reinforcing the idea that early Stoicism was too theoretical. This criticism ultimately fueled the later Stoics' emphasis on accessible, practical wisdom. In conclusion, the journey of Stoicism, from its origins in the fragmented Hellenistic world with Zeno of Citium, through the sophisticated systematization of the early Stoa, the pragmatic adaptations of the middle Stoa, and its powerful flowering in the Roman Empire with Seneca, Epictetus, and Marcus Aurelius, reveals a philosophy of remarkable depth, resilience, and adaptability. It emerged as a response to uncertainty, a quest for self-sufficiency and inner tranquility when external security evaporated. Influenced by Socratic ethics and Heraclitean cosmology, it developed a comprehensive system of logic, physics, and ethics, all aimed at living in accordance with reason and nature. Despite valid criticisms regarding its demands and initial abstractness, Stoicism evolved, demonstrating its profound capacity to adapt to different cultural and political environments, always striving to provide a practical guide for living a virtuous and flourishing life. It reminds us that our true freedom lies not in controlling the external world, but in mastering our internal responses, a timeless lesson that continues to offer solace and strength to this day. And with that, we conclude our exploration of the roots of this enduring philosophy. Friends, we're about to embark on a journey deep into the heart of Stoic philosophy, a journey that many have described as building an inner citadel. This isn't just a quaint metaphor. It's the very essence of what Stoicism offers, a robust, unshakable fortress within your own mind, impervious to the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune. It's a place where you can find profound tranquility, regardless of what the external world throws your way. Our exploration today will focus on the fundamental principles that form the bedrock of this inner citadel. We'll start with what is arguably the most practical and transformative concept in Stoic thought, the dichotomy of control. Then we'll move to the four cardinal virtues, the very blueprint for what the Stoics called the good life. We'll delve into what it means to live in accordance with nature, understand apatheia not as apathy, but as a profound freedom, and finally, recognize proherses, our faculty of choice, as our most valuable possession. Let's begin with the cornerstone, the very foundation upon which our inner citadel is built, the dichotomy of control. Imagine, for a moment, standing at a crossroads. One path leads to constant frustration, anxiety, and disappointment, the other to peace, resilience, and true freedom. The Stoics tell us that the choice of path depends entirely on whether we understand and consistently apply this single, profound idea. Epictetus, a former slave who rose to become one of Stoicism's most influential teachers, put it simply and directly in his Enchiridion, or handbook. Some things are in our control and others are not. This isn't just a casual observation. It's a revolutionary insight that, when truly grasped, shifts your entire perspective. So what exactly falls into each category? In our control, say the Stoics, are our opinions, our impulses, our desires, our aversions, in short, everything that is our own action. These are our judgments, our choices, our internal reactions to the world. They are the contents of our mind, our very will, or as Epictetus called it, our proherses. This is where our true freedom lies. Not in our control are our bodies, our property, our reputations, our health, our wealth, our social standing, and indeed, anything that is not our own action. This includes external events, the weather, traffic, the economy, other people's opinions of us, their actions, their decisions. Now, this sounds straightforward, perhaps even simplistic. But the profound implication, the very key to unlocking the inner citadel, is that our suffering, our distress, our unhappiness, stems almost entirely from confusing these two categories. We become upset when things outside our control don't go our way. We attach our peace of mind to outcomes that are never truly ours to command. Consider a simple, everyday example: rain. When it rains, we often hear people complain, "Ah, what bad weather," or "this rain is just ruining everything." But is the rain itself bad? Is it truly ruining your day? The rain is merely a meteorological event, entirely outside your control. What is within your control is your judgment of the rain. You can judge it as bad and allow that judgment to ruin your mood, or you can accept it as a neutral event, perhaps even as beneficial for the earth, and choose to adjust your plans or simply enjoy the sound. The event itself is neutral. Your reaction to it, your judgment of it, is where the meaning, and therefore your peace or distress, originates. This brings us to a slightly more nuanced, modern interpretation of the dichotomy, sometimes called the trichotomy of control. While the classic dichotomy is immensely powerful, some modern practitioners find it helpful to distinguish three categories. 1. Things fully in our control, our judgments, beliefs, intentions, and reactions, the core of proherses. 2. Things partly in our control, our efforts towards certain outcomes, for example, our health. We can eat well, exercise, sleep enough, these are actions within our control. But whether we actually get sick or stay entirely healthy is not fully in our control. Genetics, accidents, and external factors play a role. We control the inputs, not the guaranteed outputs. 3. Things completely out of our control, the weather, the past, other people's inherent nature, a global pandemic. This trichotomy acknowledges that we often have influence over some externals, but never absolute control over their final manifestation. The Stoic wisdom then is to focus our energy on what is fully in our control, our efforts, our attitudes, our choices, and detach from the outcome, which often falls into the second or third category. Think of an archer. The archer can control how they prepare their bow, how they stand, how they aim, how they release the arrow. These are all within their power, but once the arrow leaves the bow, whether it hits the bullseye, whether a gust of wind diverts it, whether the target itself moves, these are not entirely within the archer's power. A good Stoic archer focuses on executing the shot perfectly, recognizing that their goodness as an archer comes from their virtuous effort, not from the contingent outcome of hitting the bullseye every single time. Their peace is not dependent on the target, but on their process. This relentless focus on what is within our power is where true freedom resides. If your happiness depends on things outside your control, on wealth, on reputation, on others' approval, then you are a slave to those external things, perpetually vulnerable to their whims. But if your happiness depends only on your judgments, your choices, your inner state, then you are invincible. No one can take that away from you. This is the power of proherses. Epictetus describes this faculty of choice, this moral purpose, as our most valuable possession, our inner sanctuary, inviolable and unassailable. No tyrant, no illness, no misfortune can touch it. You can be invincible, he declared, if you never enter a contest in which you cannot win. The contest, for the Stoic, is always over your proherses, your inner self. This idea of internal liberation, of finding freedom by detaching from external outcomes, resonates deeply with other ancient wisdom traditions. We can see profound parallels with Buddhist concepts of non-attachment. In Buddhism, suffering is often described as arising from craving and aversion, a clinging to desires and a resistance to things as they are. This aligns strikingly with the Stoic idea that our desires and aversions, when directed towards things outside our control, are the primary source of our distress. Both traditions point towards an inner mastery, a liberation from the tyranny of external circumstances and unexamined desires. Now, a common counterargument to the dichotomy of control is this. Doesn't it lead to a passive acceptance of injustice? If I just focus on my internal reaction, does that mean I don't act to change the world or fight against wrongs? This is a crucial point and a frequent misunderstanding. The Stoic answer is a resounding no. Focusing on what's in your control does not mean inaction. It means acting from a place of virtue, not from a place of attachment to a specific outcome. A Stoic must act justly, courageously, and with wisdom because these are internal virtues, choices made by our proherses. If you witness an injustice, your duty is to act according to justice, to do what is right. Whether your action succeeds in overturning that injustice is, in part, outside your control. But your effort, your intention, your virtuous action itself, that is entirely within your control. Your peace of mind is not shattered if your efforts fail, because you have done your part, and your good lies in your virtuous intent, not in the external result. Marcus Aurelius, an emperor burdened with the immense responsibility of governing a vast empire, wrote extensively on controlling his judgments. Yet he spent his life actively legislating, fighting wars, always striving for justice and the good of his people. His meditations are a testament to this paradox. Inner tranquility through control of the self, alongside diligent action in the world. He writes, if you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. And this you have the power to revoke at any moment. Yet, he also lived a life of immense duty, making countless decisions guided by justice. He aimed to make the empire better, not simply accept its flaws. With the foundation of the dichotomy of control firmly in place, let's turn our attention to the four cardinal virtues, which for the Stoics form the very blueprint for the good life. These aren't just admirable traits. They are fundamental skills, a set of tools to navigate the complexities of existence with integrity and purpose. They are interconnected, each supporting and strengthening the others, much like the walls of our inner citadel. These virtues, wisdom, justice, courage, and temperance, originated with Plato and were adopted and adapted by the Stoics. For them, living a virtuous life was not merely one path to happiness, it was happiness. Virtue was the sole good, everything else, health, wealth, pleasure, was considered indifferent, neither good nor bad in itself, though some were preferred indifference if they could be acquired virtuously. Let's unpack each one. 1. Wisdom, phronsis/prudence. This is often considered the meta-virtue, the queen of all virtues. Stoic wisdom isn't just about accumulating knowledge, it's about practical wisdom, the ability to discern what is truly good, what is bad, and what is indifferent. It's the skill of navigating complex situations, making reasoned judgments, and understanding how to apply the other virtues effectively. It is wisdom that allows us to understand the dichotomy of control itself, to correctly categorize what is and isn't within our power. It's the ability to see things clearly, without the distorting lens of unhealthy emotions or irrational desires. Marcus Aurelius, contemplating the vastness of the cosmos, sought wisdom in understanding his place within it. Dwell on the beauty of life, watch the stars, and see yourself running with them. For him, this cosmic perspective was part of wisdom, helping him to put earthly concerns into proper proportion. In daily life, wisdom helps us choose our actions, words, and thoughts carefully. It prompts us to ask, is this judgment accurate? Is this impulse beneficial? Is this action aligned with reason and virtue? It's the ongoing process of learning, reflection, and self-correction. 2. Justice dikyasin. This virtue guides our interactions with others. It's about acting rightly, fairly, and kindly towards all human beings. For the Stoics, we are all part of a larger interconnected community, a cosmopolis sharing in universal reason. Therefore, acting unjustly is acting against nature, against reason, and against our own rational humanity. Justice isn't just about obeying laws, it's about an ethical posture towards the world. It means treating others with respect, empathy, and a recognition of their shared humanity. It means contributing to the common good. This virtue directly addresses that earlier counterargument about passive acceptance. A Stoic cannot be passive in the face of injustice, because to do so would be to violate the virtue of justice. Their motivation for action, however, remains internal, to act virtuously, rather than being driven by attachment to a specific external outcome. Seneca eloquently put it, "Wherever there is a human being, there is an opportunity for a kindness." This isn't sentimentalism, it's the recognition that our rational nature impels us towards benevolence and cooperation. Consider applying justice in daily interactions, being honest in your dealings, keeping promises, offering help when you can, speaking up when you see someone being wronged, even if it's uncomfortable. These are all acts of justice. 3. Courage Andrea/fortitude. Stoic courage is far more expansive than mere physical bravery on a battlefield. It encompasses moral courage, resilience in the face of adversity, and the strength to endure pain, fear, and uncertainty. It's the courage to face unpleasant truths, even about oneself. The courage to persist in virtuous action even when it's difficult, unpopular, or seemingly hopeless. The courage to accept what is outside your control with dignity. It's the fortitude to endure illness, loss, criticism, or physical discomfort without allowing these externals to corrupt your proherses. Epictetus, having lived through slavery and physical lameness, embodied this courage. His teachings are steeped in the idea that our spirit can remain unbroken, no matter what external conditions assail us. He often urged his students, "It is not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." This reaction requires immense courage, the courage to choose reason over emotion, virtue over despair. In practical terms, courage manifests in persevering through a difficult task, speaking your mind respectfully when others disagree, facing a personal fear, or simply rising to meet the challenges of the day with an unwavering commitment to virtue. 4. Temperance, self-discipline. This virtue is about moderation, self-control, and balance in all things. It's the mastery over our desires and appetites, ensuring they remain within reasonable bounds and don't overwhelm our reason. Temperance means knowing what is enough. It's about avoiding excess in pleasure, wealth, food, drink, and even in our emotional reactions. It's about self-awareness regarding our impulses and exercising the discipline to align them with reason. It's not asceticism for its own sake, but rather self-control that frees us from the tyranny of insatiable desires, which are, by their nature, often directed towards things outside our control. Marcus Aurelius reminds us, very little is needed to make a happy life. It is all within yourself, in your way of thinking. This embodies temperance, finding contentment not in external accumulation, but in internal sufficiency. Practicing temperance might involve moderating your consumption of anything that could lead to excess, from food and drink to social media. It means developing a healthy detachment from external comforts and pleasures, so they do not dictate your well-being. It is the discipline to delay gratification, to choose long-term good over immediate, fleeting pleasure. These four virtues are not isolated islands, they are deeply interrelated. You cannot be truly courageous without the wisdom to know what is worth fighting for. You cannot be truly just without the temperance to control your selfish desires. They are facets of the same gem, all stemming from the overarching Stoic goal, living in accordance with nature, physis. What does it mean to live in accordance with nature? This phrase carries a dual meaning in Stoicism. Firstly, it refers to universal nature, the rational order of the cosmos, the divine reason or logos that permeates and governs all things. For the Stoics, the universe is not a chaotic mess but an ordered, rational system, unfolding according to a divine plan. To live in accordance with this universal nature means to accept what happens, to understand that everything is part of this grand, interconnected whole. It means aligning our will with the will of the universe, recognizing that some things are simply destined to be. This cosmic perspective helps temper our reactions to events outside our control, fostering a sense of serene acceptance. Secondly, and perhaps more importantly for daily practice, living in accordance with nature refers to human nature. What is unique to human beings? Our capacity for reason. To live according to nature, then, means to live according to reason. This is not about retreating to a primitive state or behaving like animals. It's about exercising our highest faculty, our rational mind, to its fullest potential. Our reason helps us to discern what is truly good virtue and bad vice, and what is indifferent. It helps us apply the dichotomy of control, guiding our proherses to make virtuous choices. When we live rationally, we are living as fully human, fulfilling our unique purpose in the cosmic scheme. The virtues are simply the practical application of reason in various domains of life. The good life, therefore, is a life of virtue, lived in harmony with both human reason and the rational order of the universe. This profound emphasis on reason brings us to another cross-reference, Socratic self-knowledge. The Socratic imperative, know thyself, is foundational to Stoic practice. Understanding our own nature as rational beings, recognizing our unique capacity for proherses, and continually examining our judgments and impulses is at the core of both philosophies. Before we can live virtuously, we must first understand what it means to be human and what our rational faculties entail. Moving deeper into the Stoic psychological framework, we encounter a concept often misunderstood. Apatheia. When many hear the word apatheia, they immediately think of apathy, a lack of feeling, indifference, a cold detachment from the world. But this couldn't be further from the Stoic meaning. For the Stoics, apatheia is not apathy. It is freedom from pathos. So what is pathos? Pathos refers to unhealthy, irrational, and disturbing passions or emotions. These are emotions that arise from incorrect judgments about what is good or bad, leading to excessive reactions that disturb our inner tranquility. For instance, judging that losing money is an absolute evil would lead to pathos like excessive grief, anxiety, or anger. These pathos are not natural or healthy, they are products of faulty reasoning. The Stoics even differentiated between pathos and propatheia. Propatheia are the initial, involuntary physiological reactions we have, a sudden jump when you hear a loud noise, a blush of embarrassment, a pang of initial sadness. These are natural precognitive responses. A Stoic acknowledges these initial reactions, but does not assent to them as a judgment that something truly bad has happened. It is the assent, the conscious agreement to the judgment, that turns a propatheia into a destructive pathos. The goal of apatheia is not to eliminate all emotion. Instead, it is to cultivate eupatheia, healthy, rational, and appropriate emotions. These include joy, chara, caution, eulabia, and goodwill, euna. A Stoic experiences joy in virtue, caution in the face of vice, and goodwill towards all humanity. These are not overwhelming or irrational, they are reasoned responses aligned with virtue. The ultimate aim of achieving apatheia is to reach two highly sought-after states, ataraxia. This refers to tranquility, freedom from disturbance, a profound inner calm. It's the peaceful state of a mind that is not rattled by external events or internal turmoil. Eudaimonia. This is a deep sense of inner peace, cheerfulness, and well-being. It's a serene confidence in one's path, a contentment that comes from living virtuously and rationally. Seneca, another key Stoic thinker, dedicated an entire treatise on tranquility of mind to exploring how to achieve this state. He argued for a life of purposeful engagement, tempered by self-reflection and detachment from external outcomes. His own life served as a powerful example. Seneca faced immense political disgrace, multiple exiles, and eventually was forced by Emperor Nero to commit suicide. Yet his writings from these periods demonstrate a profound application of apatheia. He didn't wallow in self-pity or despair. Instead, he used these extreme adversities as opportunities for philosophical reflection, reaffirming his commitment to virtue and the inviolability of his inner proherses. He used his exile not as a punishment, but as a chance to deepen his understanding of philosophy, to write, and to practice the very principles he taught. Here, too, we encounter a crucial counterargument. Does apatheia truly free us, or does it diminish our empathy, making us cold or unfeeling towards the suffering of others? Again, the Stoic response is emphatic. Apatheia does not equate to a lack of empathy. In fact, by being free from the overwhelming pathos of distress, fear, or anger, a Stoic is more capable of acting with genuine compassion and justice. When we are caught up in our own emotional turmoil, our judgment is clouded, and our ability to help effectively is often hampered. A Stoic recognizes suffering in others. They understand it with their reason and respond with the virtues of justice and benevolence. But they do not assent to the judgment that the suffering is inherently bad in a way that overwhelms their own reason or ability to act. They act to alleviate suffering because it is the rational and virtuous thing to do, not because they are swept away by emotional distress. Their calm and clear mind allows them to be more effective in their aid. Marcus Aurelius reminds himself, "Do not be vexed, for everything accords with the nature of the whole, and in a short time you will be no one and nowhere like Hadrian and Augustus." This isn't a dismissal of suffering, but a plea for perspective, for a rational detachment that allows one to act effectively, unburdened by excessive personal distress. It is about understanding that while unfortunate, the event is part of a larger order, and one's duty is to respond virtuously, not to lament the unchangeable. This brings us full circle to proherses, our faculty of choice, our moral purpose, our inner will. We've touched on it throughout, but it deserves a moment of dedicated reflection as our most valuable possession. Epictetus saw proherses as the true self, the only thing that is truly ours and truly free. It is the capacity to choose how we react, how we judge, what we assent to. It is the seat of our autonomy. Everything else can be taken from us, our bodies, our possessions, our loved ones, our very life, but our proherses remains inviolable. No external force can compel us to assent to a false judgment or to act against our will. We always retain the power to choose our response, to align ourselves with reason and virtue. Consider Epictetus's own life. Born a slave, subjected to physical abuse, he was lamed by his master. By any conventional measure, he was utterly unfree. Yet he taught that he was the freest man of all, precisely because he understood and guarded his proherses. He could not control his master's actions, but he could control his own judgment of those actions. He could not control his physical body, but he could control his attitude towards pain and disability. His life was a living testament to the ultimate freedom found within. This is the very heart of the inner citadel. It's not a physical place, but a state of mind, built upon the bedrock of the dichotomy of control, fortified by the four cardinal virtues, and sustained by the serene clarity of apatheia. It is the fortress of proherses, where our freedom, our dignity, and our peace reside, unassailable by any external force. As we conclude this deep dive into the core concepts of Stoicism, I hope you see how profoundly interconnected these ideas are. The dichotomy of control empowers us to focus our energy wisely. The virtues provide a moral compass and a guide for action. Living in accordance with nature offers a cosmic perspective and a rational purpose. Apatheia frees us from destructive passions, leading to tranquility, and proherses reminds us of our ultimate, unshakable freedom. These aren't just abstract philosophical notions. They are practical tools forged in the fires of ancient wisdom, still sharp and relevant for navigating the challenges of our modern world. They are the means by which you, too, can begin to build your own inner citadel, a refuge of peace, resilience, and unyielding strength, no matter what storms rage outside its walls. The journey begins now with the choice to understand and the courage to practice. Welcome back to Snooze Philosophy, where we delve into ancient wisdom that, far from being dull, offers profound tools for navigating the complexities of modern life. Today, we're not just discussing ideas. We're stepping into the training ground, exploring the practical exercises and techniques that transform Stoic philosophy from a theoretical framework into a vibrant, living practice. Think of this as equipping yourself with an arsenal for the soul, a collection of mental and emotional tools designed to cultivate resilience, serenity, and virtue in your daily existence. These aren't abstract concepts to be pondered. They are active, repeatable methods refined over centuries that empower us to shape our inner world, regardless of the chaotic currents swirling around us. Let's begin with perhaps the most counterintuitive, yet profoundly effective of these practices: premeditatio malorum, or the premeditation of evils. At first glance, the idea of intentionally dwelling on potential misfortunes might sound like a recipe for anxiety, a morbid indulgence in negativity. But for the Stoics, and particularly for Seneca, who articulated this practice so eloquently in his letters, it was precisely the opposite. Its purpose was not to invite dread, but to disarm it. Not to make us fearful, but to make us fearless. The essence of premeditatio malorum lies in mentally rehearsing future difficulties. We are encouraged to sit with the possibility of things going wrong, truly wrong. Imagine losing your job, your possessions, your health, even a loved one. Visualize the scenario with as much detail as you can. Feel the initial pang of discomfort, the shock, the grief, but then, importantly, observe your mind's reaction. Ask yourself, what would I do? How would I cope? What remains within my control? Seneca, in his letters to Lucilius, offers a direct invitation to this practice, writing, "Rehearse evils." It is less painful to feel a wound than to expect one. When you train your mind to face trials, it is prepared. He recognized that much of our suffering comes not from the events themselves, but from the surprise and unpreparedness when they strike. We are blindsided, and our emotional response is often disproportionate because we haven't built up our mental fortitude. By consciously anticipating these evils, we dilute their power. When the blow eventually comes, it falls on a mind that has already considered its possibility, perhaps even its inevitability, and has mentally rehearsed a rational, virtuous response. It's like a mental fire drill. You hope you never have to evacuate, but if the alarm sounds, you know the exits, you know the procedure, and panic is less likely to set in. Consider a practical example. You have an important presentation coming up. Instead of just hoping for the best, you might engage in premeditatio malorum. You imagine your technology failing, your notes getting lost, a difficult question from the audience you can't answer, or even a sudden illness preventing you from attending. You don't wish for these things, but you mentally walk through them. If the projector fails, I'll use the whiteboard. If I get a tricky question, I'll acknowledge it and offer to follow up later. If I'm too ill, I'll have a colleague ready to step in. This exercise isn't about conjuring negative outcomes. It's about shifting your locus of control. You recognize that while the external circumstances might be beyond your absolute command, your internal response, your resourcefulness, your composure, your acceptance is always within your power. Historically, Seneca himself was no stranger to adversity, enduring exile under Emperor Claudius. His writings on this subject ring with a profound authenticity, suggesting that he practiced what he preached. He encouraged Lucilius to assume the aspect of a tough and intrepid foe and say, "This is the very thing which I feared might happen." He saw it as a form of inoculation, a small dose of mental suffering now to build immunity against greater suffering later. The Stoics understood that we tend to overestimate the impact of misfortunes. We imagine them to be unbearable, catastrophic. But often, when they actually happen, our innate resilience kicks in, and we find ways to adapt and overcome that we never anticipated. Premeditatio malorum helps us tap into that resilience before we're forced to. Now, it's crucial to address the counterarguments to this practice. Can premeditatio malorum lead to excessive anxiety for some individuals? Absolutely. For someone already prone to rumination, obsessive worry, or anxiety disorders, deliberately focusing on worst-case scenarios could indeed exacerbate their condition. The key distinction, as with many Stoic practices, lies in the intention and the frame. It's not about dwelling endlessly on fear and despair, but about a controlled, analytical, and ultimately empowering confrontation with potential hardship. It's about mental preparation, not emotional indulgence. The Stoic practitioner, guided by reason, immediately shifts from imagining the problem to strategizing the response and accepting what is beyond their control. This is where cross-referencing with modern psychology becomes illuminating. In cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, techniques like decatastrophizing involve asking, "What's the worst that could happen? And if that happened, what would I do then? How bad would it really be?" This mirrors premeditatio malorum's core idea, to dismantle the irrational fear of the unknown by bringing it into the light of reason. It's also akin to exposure therapy but performed mentally, helping to desensitize us to feared outcomes in a safe, controlled way. From anticipating adversity, we move to a profound embrace of reality, captured beautifully by the concept of amor fati, the love of fate. While the term itself was coined by Nietzsche, the underlying philosophy is deeply, unequivocally Stoic. Amor fati is more than mere acceptance. It is an active, even joyful affirmation of everything that happens, seeing it as an integral, indeed perfect, part of the cosmic order. It's about not just enduring what fate sends your way, but embracing it, loving it, because it is precisely what is happening, and therefore it is what is meant to be. Marcus Aurelius, in his Meditations, constantly grappled with this principle. He wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." This is amor fati in action. A missed flight is not merely an annoyance, it's an opportunity for an unexpected conversation, a moment of quiet reflection, or a chance to reroute and discover something new. A difficult boss is not just a source of stress. They are a training ground for your patience, your resilience, and your ability to manage challenging personalities. The universe, in its infinite wisdom, presents us with precisely what we need for our growth, even if we don't recognize it at the time. The Stoic view is that the universe is a rational, interconnected system. Everything that occurs, even seemingly random or tragic events, is part of a larger, coherent whole. To resist an event to wish it hadn't happened is to resist the very nature of reality, which is not only futile but also a source of immense psychological suffering. Instead, amor fati asks us to see every event, good or bad, as raw material for our virtue, as an opportunity to practice wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance. It's about recognizing that while we cannot control the external event, we always have control over our response to it. Consider the historical anecdote of Epictetus, who was born into slavery and subjected to brutal treatment. Legend has it that his master once twisted his leg. Epictetus calmly warned him, "You will break it." When the master did break his leg, Epictetus simply stated, "I told you you would." This is a radical, almost shocking demonstration of amor fati. It wasn't that Epictetus wanted his leg broken, but he accepted it as a fact of his reality, and crucially, he controlled his inner reaction to it, refusing to be overwhelmed by anger or despair. He transformed the external misfortune into an opportunity to demonstrate profound inner freedom. Now, amor fati often faces a significant counterargument. Does it encourage complacency or inaction in the face of suffering or injustice? If we are to love our fate, does that mean we simply accept injustice and do nothing to change it? This is a vital misinterpretation. Amor fati does not mean passive resignation. It doesn't absolve us of the responsibility to act virtuously and improve the world where we can. Instead, it informs how we act. We accept the present reality as the starting point, not as an end point. We accept that an injustice has occurred, and then, from a place of calm rationality, we assess what is within our control to change. We apply our virtue to the situation. We fight for justice, but if our efforts fail, we accept the outcome of our efforts without bitterness or resentment, knowing we did what was within our power. We love the hand we are dealt, not because we like it, but because it is the only hand we have, and we play it with skill and integrity. This distinction is key. For a Stoic, action is compelled by virtue, not by a desire to change fate. If you witness an injustice, you are morally obligated to act, to speak out, to intervene if it is within your power. But if your intervention does not produce the desired outcome, you do not fall into despair. You accept the result, the outcome that fate has delivered, and then refocus on your next virtuous action. Amor fati is a profound liberation from the tyranny of what if and if only. It allows us to fully engage with the present, to make the best of every situation, and to find growth even in hardship. It finds resonance in modern psychological approaches like radical acceptance in dialectical behavior therapy, DBT, which teaches patients to accept reality as it is, even if it's painful, as a prerequisite for change and emotional regulation. It's also closely aligned with the growth mindset, where challenges are seen not as insurmountable obstacles, but as opportunities for learning and development. Moving from embracing fate to appreciating the fleeting nature of life itself, we come to memento mori, remember you must die. This is another practice that, like premeditatio malorum, might initially strike one as morbid, yet it serves a profoundly life-affirming purpose for the Stoic. It's not about dwelling on death with fear, but about using the awareness of our mortality as a powerful catalyst for living fully, virtuously, and presently. The Stoics understood that our time is the most precious and finite resource we possess. Seneca's powerful essay on the shortness of life is a masterclass in this philosophy. He chastises those who squander their days on trivialities, on endless striving for wealth or status, perpetually postponing their true living. He writes, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it. Life is long enough, and a sufficiently generous amount has been given to us for the accomplishment of the very greatest things if it is all well invested." Memento mori is the constant, quiet whisper in our ear, reminding us that every moment is precious and every choice matters. How does one practice memento mori? It involves consciously reflecting on the fact that your life and the lives of everyone you know will end. Imagine it. Think of your final day. What would truly matter to you? Would you regret the arguments you started, the grudges you held, the time you wasted worrying about things outside your control? Or would you wish you had spent more time with loved ones, pursued your deepest values, acted with more kindness and courage? This reflection helps to clarify priorities, to strip away the trivial concerns that often consume our energy, and to focus on what is truly essential. It gives us a sense of urgency, not panic, but a calm determination to live in accordance with our highest ideals now. A closely related practice often found in ancient literature is eubisunt. Where are they now? This Latin phrase, meaning "where are," is a rhetorical question that contemplates the transient nature of life and existence. Where are the great emperors, the celebrated beauties, the mighty armies, the towering empires of yesterday? Gone, reduced to dust and memory. This meditation on the impermanence of all things, from our own lives to the grandest human endeavors, serves to further reinforce the lessons of memento mori. It shows us the futility of attaching ourselves too strongly to external goods, wealth, fame, power, for they too are fleeting. All that truly remains is our character, our virtue. Historically, the practice of memento mori permeated Roman culture. During a Roman triumph, the victorious general, parading through the streets to adoring crowds, would have a slave standing behind him, holding a golden crown above his head and repeatedly whispering, "Respice post te. Hominum te esse memento, memento mori." Look behind you, remember you are a man, remember you must die. This was a powerful reminder against hubris and a call to humility and perspective amidst the intoxicating glow of success. Later in medieval Europe, images of skulls and skeletons were common in art and architecture, serving a similar purpose. One counterargument to memento mori is that it could be morbid or lead to existential dread if not framed within the Stoic understanding of a rational and benevolent cosmos. If death is seen merely as an arbitrary end, then dwelling on it could indeed be depressing. But for the Stoics, death is a natural process, an integral part of the universe's design. It is not to be feared but accepted. By accepting it, we free ourselves from its grip and empower ourselves to live more fully. It's not about being afraid of death, but about being aware of it so that we may live more fully before it. Modern analogs can be found in mindfulness practices that emphasize impermanence, recognizing that all phenomena, including our lives, are transient. It's about letting go of attachment, not to life itself, but to the illusion of its endlessness. Moving from abstract reflections to concrete daily habits, we turn our attention to the practice of journaling and self-reflection. The most famous example of this, of course, is Marcus Aurelius's Meditations. What we read today as one of philosophy's most profound and moving works was never intended for publication. It was a private journal, a personal conversation with himself, a set of notes and reflections written by an emperor in the quiet moments between the demands of empire, often during military campaigns. It is the ultimate testament to the Stoic commitment to self-improvement and rigorous self-examination. For Marcus, journaling was his daily philosophical exercise. He used it to clarify his thoughts, to remind himself of Stoic principles, to dissect his judgments, and to prepare for the challenges of the day. His meditations are filled with reminders to himself. When you're grieved by any external thing, it is not the thing itself that troubles you, but your judgment about it. Or, begin the morning by saying to yourself, "I shall meet with the busybody, the ungrateful, arrogant, deceitful, envious, unsocial. All these things happen to them by reason of their ignorance of what is good and evil." He wasn't just writing down his thoughts. He was actively applying philosophy to his lived experience, holding himself accountable. The Stoic approach to journaling often involves two main components, a morning reflection and an evening review. In the morning, you might set your intentions for the day, visualize potential challenges, and remind yourself of the virtues you aim to practice. Today, I will strive to be patient with colleagues, courageous in facing difficult decisions, and just in my interactions. This prepares your mind, setting a philosophical compass for the day ahead. In the evening, the practice shifts to review. Seneca, in his letters, describes his own nightly routine. When the light has been removed and my wife has fallen silent, aware of this habit, I examine my entire day and go over what I have said and done. I conceal nothing from myself, I pass over nothing. He would ask himself, what fault of mine have I cured today? What error have I resisted? In what respect have I improved? This systematic self-reflection cultivates self-awareness, allowing us to identify patterns in our thoughts and behaviors. We can spot irrational judgments, emotional triggers, and areas where we fall short of our ideals. It's a vital tool for tracking progress on the path to virtue. By externalizing our thoughts onto paper, we create a distance that allows for more objective analysis. It's like debugging a program. You can't fix the code if you don't know where the errors are. The benefits of journaling are widely recognized today. Cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, often employs thought records, where individuals write down activating events, their automatic thoughts, emotions, and then challenge those thoughts with rational responses. This is a direct descendant of the Stoic journaling practice. Mindfulness journals encourage observing thoughts and feelings without judgment, similar to how Stoics observe impressions. Gratitude journaling, while not strictly Stoic, also aligns with the Stoic emphasis on appreciating what is and focusing on the good. The beauty of journaling is its accessibility and adaptability. Anyone can do it, and there's no single right way. The purpose is the same: to foster self-awareness, clarify judgments, and align one's actions with one's values. This brings us to one of the foundational Stoic practices, interwoven with all the others we've discussed. Examining impressions and withholding assent, often referred to as epictetus, though the Stoic use differs slightly from the skeptics. This is perhaps the most direct and powerful tool for controlling our emotional reactions and maintaining inner tranquility. Epictetus, the former slave who became a celebrated Stoic teacher, emphasized this above all else. He famously said, "It is not events that disturb people, but their judgments concerning them." Think about that for a moment. An event occurs, a coworker criticizes your work, you get stuck in traffic, a friend cancels plans. The event itself is neutral, it simply is. But instantly our minds generate an impression or a judgment about that event. This criticism is unfair, this traffic is ruining my day, my friend doesn't value me. And it's these judgments, these assents to our initial impressions, that generate our emotional distress, anger, frustration, sadness. The practice of examining impressions is about creating a pause between the external event and our internal reaction. When an impression arises, instead of immediately assenting to it, we are taught to hold it at arm's length, to scrutinize it. Epictetus advises us, when therefore any bitter impression is presented to you, lay hold of it and say, "You are an impression and not at all what you appear to be." Then examine it and test it by those rules which you possess. This examination involves a few critical questions. 1. Is this truly a bad thing or just something I've judged as bad? Is a traffic jam inherently bad, or is my judgment that I shouldn't be delayed causing my frustration? 2. Is this within my control or outside of it? Can I control my coworker's opinion? No. Can I control my response? Yes. 3. What is the objective reality of the situation, stripped of my emotional overlay? My coworker gave feedback, it felt harsh. The fact is, feedback was given. By asking these questions, we prevent automatic, often irrational, emotional responses. We withhold our assent to the initial, unexamined impression. We realize that the power to disturb us doesn't lie in the event itself, but in our interpretation of it. This practice is the bedrock of Stoic emotional regulation. It's not about suppressing emotions, but about preventing the formation of negative ones in the first place by challenging the underlying judgments. Consider a simple example. You receive an email from your boss that sounds critical. Your immediate impression might be, "Oh no, I'm in trouble, I'm going to get fired." The practice of withholding assent asks you to pause. Is this truly an objective fact that I'm in trouble and will be fired? Or is it an impression, a fear-based judgment? What actually happened? My boss sent an email with feedback. You then consider what is in your control, your response to the feedback, your actions going forward. You acknowledge the impression, but do not let it dictate your emotional state. Historically, Epictetus's own life as a former slave deeply informed this practice. He learned that while he could not control his external circumstances, his master's whims, his physical pain, he absolutely controlled his inner citadel, his judgments, and his assent. He described himself as lame but free. His master could shackle his leg, but not his will. This radical internal freedom, born from the practice of examining impressions, allowed him to maintain his dignity and tranquility even in the most oppressive conditions. The modern psychological analogues for examining impressions and withholding assent are strikingly clear. Cognitive restructuring in CBT is precisely this process. Identifying distorted or unhelpful thoughts, impressions, challenging them with evidence and reason, and replacing them with more balanced and realistic ones. Mindfulness practices, too, encourage us to observe our thoughts and feelings as they arise, without immediately identifying with them or reacting to them. We learn to see thoughts as mere mental events, not necessarily reflections of reality or commands to be obeyed. This cognitive distancing allows us to create space, to witness our thoughts rather than being swept away by them. It's about developing responsibility, the ability to choose our response rather than simply reacting. In essence, these practices, premeditatio malorum, amor fati, memento mori, and iubi sunt, journaling and examining impressions, form a comprehensive curriculum for living well. They are not isolated techniques, but interconnected threads woven into the fabric of a Stoic life. Premeditatio malorum prepares us for adversity, amor fati helps us embrace whatever comes, memento mori ensures we value the time we have, journaling provides the daily self-assessment, and examining impressions offers the moment-by-moment control over our inner world. They require consistent effort, a daily commitment, but the rewards are immeasurable. A profound sense of inner peace, unwavering resilience in the face of life's inevitable challenges, and a clarity of purpose that allows us to live with integrity and virtue. The Stoics were not merely philosophers of the mind. They were architects of the soul, providing us with an arsenal of tools to build a fortress of tranquility within ourselves, a sanctuary impervious to the whims of fortune. So pick up these tools, experiment with them, and begin building your own invincible soul. The journey of self-mastery is a continuous one, and these practices are your trusted companions on that path. We've spent considerable time exploring the inner citadel of Stoicism, understanding how this ancient philosophy equips the individual for tranquility, resilience, and inner freedom in the face of life's inevitable challenges. We've delved into its metaphysics, its logic, and its practical applications for cultivating virtue within the self. But Stoicism, as rich and profound as it is for personal development, is far from a philosophy of isolated contemplation. It is, perhaps surprisingly to some, a deeply social philosophy, one that extends its ethical imperatives far beyond the individual to guide action in the world, to shape our relationships, and to define our duties within the broader human community. Today we journey beyond the self to understand the Stoic in society, how this philosophy provides a robust framework for ethics, duty, and perhaps its most radical contribution, the idea of cosmopolitanism, the notion of being a citizen of the world. This is where Stoicism truly steps onto the global stage, advocating for a universal human connection that resonates powerfully even today. At the heart of the Stoic social philosophy lies a concept known as oikeiosis. It's a Greek term often translated as appropriation, affinity, or making one's own, and it's a foundational psychological and ethical theory explaining how we naturally develop our sense of self and our relationship with the world around us. For the early Stoics, oikeiosis begins with an innate impulse towards self-preservation and an affinity for our own constitution. A newborn infant, they observed, naturally seeks to preserve itself, to reach for what is beneficial, and to recoil from what is harmful. This initial self-love, this making one's own of one's own body and mind, is not selfish in the pejorative sense, but rather a natural, rational starting point. But the brilliance of oikeiosis isn't in its starting point, but in its dynamic trajectory. The Stoics argued that this innate affinity doesn't remain confined to the individual. Through the exercise of reason, we come to recognize that what is natural and appropriate for us is also, by extension, natural and appropriate for others. We begin to extend this circle of concern, first to our immediate family, recognizing their well-being as intimately connected to our own. Then to our friends, our neighbors, our community, our city, our nation, and ultimately to all of humanity. Imagine it as a series of concentric circles, radiating outwards from the self. The innermost circle is me. The next circle encompasses my immediate family. Beyond that, my extended family and close friends. Then my community, my fellow citizens. And so on until the outermost circle encompasses the entire human race. The Stoics believed that reason compels us to incrementally draw in these outer circles, to appropriate the concerns of others as our own, recognizing the shared spark of reason that unites us all. This isn't a process driven by fleeting sentiment or emotional attachment alone, but by a rational understanding of our shared nature, our common humanity, and our interconnectedness within the grand order of the cosmos. As the Stoic philosopher Heraclitean described it in his Elements of Ethics, we are to draw the circles somehow towards the center. It's a conscious, rational effort to reduce the distance, to lessen the psychological and ethical separation between ourselves and others. This expanding circle of concern finds its ultimate expression in the truly revolutionary concept of cosmopolitanism, the idea of being a citizen of the world. This wasn't merely a poetic metaphor for the Stoics. It was a profound ethical directive. The early Stoic philosopher Zeno of Citium, the founder of the school, famously wrote a work titled The Republic, which sadly is lost to us, but historical accounts describe it as outlining a radical vision of a cosmopolitan society where people live together without laws, money, or even temples, united by reason and love. While later Stoics tempered some of Zeno's more extreme proposals, the core idea of universal human brotherhood remained foundational. For the Stoics, we are all part of one single, universal city, the cosmopolis, governed by the universal law of reason. Our primary citizenship, therefore, is not to our birthplace, our nation, or our tribe, but to humanity itself. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor, eloquently captures this in his Meditations when he writes, "My nature is rational and civic. And my city and country, so far as I am Antoninus, is Rome, but so far as I am a man, it is the world." He understood that while he had specific duties to Rome, his ultimate allegiance and responsibility lay with the greater human community. This concept of cosmopolitanism was radical in the ancient world, often characterized by strong tribal loyalties, city-state rivalries, and a sharp distinction between civilized Greeks or Romans and barbarians. The Stoics shattered these divisions, insisting that what truly matters is not one's birthplace or social status, but one's capacity for reason and virtue. Every human being, regardless of their origin or social standing, possesses a fragment of the divine reason logos, and is thus worthy of respect and ethical consideration. This vision laid significant groundwork for later notions of universal human rights and global citizenship, demonstrating the enduring power and foresight of Stoic thought. Flowing directly from oikeiosis and cosmopolitanism is the Stoic emphasis on social duty, or officia in Latin. These are the appropriate actions that we are called to perform, not merely for our own benefit but for the common good. While the Stoics differentiated between perfect actions, which only the wise sage can consistently perform, aligning perfectly with virtue and appropriate actions, they believed that all rational individuals are capable of and obligated to perform officia. These duties arise from our understanding of our place in the cosmic whole and our interconnectedness with other rational beings. Cicero, though not a pure Stoic, was deeply influenced by the Stoic Painted in his work De Officiis, on duties, which became a foundational text for understanding ethical obligations in Western thought. Cicero explains that our duties stem from four primary sources: our common humanity, the most expansive circle, our particular place in society, our roles as parents, children, citizens, etc., our individual character, and the moral choices we make in specific situations. The key takeaway is that these duties are performed out of a rational understanding of what is good and right, not primarily out of emotional attachment or the expectation of reward. Think of it this way. Just as a hand serves the body, not merely for its own sake but for the health and functioning of the entire organism, so too must individuals contribute to the koinonia, the community, the commonwealth. Our well-being is inextricably linked to the well-being of others. To act for the common good is not a sacrifice of one's own interests, but a rational recognition of where one's true interests lie, in a flourishing, just society where reason prevails. It aligns with our nature as social beings. This brings us to Stoic perspectives on relationships and interactions within society, particularly regarding justice, friendship, compassion, and anger. Justice is not just one virtue among many. For the Stoics, it is a cardinal virtue, deeply interwoven with wisdom, courage, and temperance. Justice means giving each person what is due to them, based on their inherent worth as a rational being. It's not merely about upholding the law, but about upholding what is fundamentally fair and right according to universal reason. A Stoic leader, for example, would be expected to govern justly, making decisions that benefit the whole community, not just a select few, because they understand their role as a servant of the people, contributing to the larger cosmic design. Marcus Aurelius exemplified this, seeing his imperial power not as a privilege, but as a profound burden of service and responsibility. He continually reminded himself that his purpose was to act with a view to the common good. Friendship is also seen as a natural extension of oikeiosis. Friends are not simply companions or useful allies, they are other selves. The bond of friendship is not based on utility or pleasure, but on shared virtue and a recognition of shared rational nature. Seneca in his letters speaks beautifully about the ideal of friendship, emphasizing its reciprocal nature and the joy of beneficence. He writes, "Let us have everything in common, we shall be richer for it." The only proper use of all your possessions is to share them with a friend. True friendship for the Stoics involves a mutual commitment to virtue and a willingness to offer aid and support, not out of emotional obligation, but out of a reasoned understanding of what is good and appropriate. Now let's address compassion and the common misconception that Stoics are emotionless. This is perhaps one of the most persistent misunderstandings of Stoicism. The Stoics did not advocate for the suppression of all feelings. Instead, they aimed for apatheia, which means freedom from passion or freedom from unhealthy emotions, not apathy in the modern sense of indifference. They sought to eliminate path, the irrational, unhealthy, and often destructive passions like excessive grief, fear, envy, or unchecked pleasure, which they saw as errors of judgment that disturb our inner tranquility and distort our reason. However, the Stoics recognized and even cultivated eupatheia, good emotions, or rational failings. These are emotions that are in harmony with reason and nature. Examples include joy chara, which is a rational delight in virtue, caution eulabia, which is a rational aversion to what is truly harmful moral evil, and wish boulesis, which is a rational desire for what is truly good virtue. So how does this relate to compassion? A Stoic would not wallow in pity, ilios, which they saw as a disorienting passion that could cloud judgment and lead to ineffective or even harmful actions. Instead, a Stoic would feel benevolence or goodwill towards someone suffering, and this goodwill would prompt them to act with reasoned compassion. Their response would be active and helpful, aimed at alleviating suffering if it's within their power and if it's a virtuous course of action, rather than simply feeling bad for someone in a way that provides no real assistance. As Seneca argues, the sage will not pity but will come to the aid. The distinction is crucial. It's not about lacking feeling, but about directing one's feelings and actions in a rational, effective, and virtuous way. When responding to injustice, a Stoic wouldn't react with an emotional outburst of anger, but with a firm, reasoned resolve to correct the wrong, guided by a sense of justice and benevolence. This brings us to anger. Seneca's essay De Ira on anger is one of the most thorough and compelling ancient treatises on the subject. He argues emphatically that anger is a wholly destructive and irrational passion, a temporary madness. It blinds us to reason, distorts our judgment, and ultimately harms both the one who feels it and those around them. For Seneca, anger is never a useful tool, even when confronting injustice. He meticulously dissects anger's origins, its symptoms, and its devastating consequences. The Stoic approach to anger is not to simply suppress it, which is often an impossible and unhealthy task. Instead, it's about understanding anger's true nature as an erroneous judgment, a judgment that someone has wronged us in a way that warrants an aggressive, vengeful response. By challenging this underlying judgment, by seeing the situation from a broader, more rational perspective, perhaps the person acted out of ignorance or weakness, or was themselves suffering, we can prevent anger from taking root. If a Stoic is confronted with injustice, their response would be firm, resolute, and aimed at correction or defense, but it would be devoid of the inner turmoil and destructive impulse of anger. It would be driven by the virtue of justice, tempered by wisdom, and executed with an unclouded mind. Beyond specific relationships, Stoicism also provided a framework for understanding and fulfilling one's roles within society. The Stoics believed that each person has multiple roles or characters, prosopa, they play. As a human being, as a family member, son, daughter, parent, as a citizen, as a professional, and so on. Their duty is to play each of these roles virtuously, according to reason and nature. The specific duties attached to a role might differ, but the underlying commitment to virtue remains constant. This applies across the social spectrum, from ruler to slave. A ruler, like Marcus Aurelius, understood his position not as one of arbitrary power, but as a sacred trust, a stewardship for the common good. He constantly reminded himself that he was there to serve, not to be served, to protect, not to exploit. His meditations are replete with reflections on the duties of leadership, the burden of responsibility, and the imperative to act justly for the benefit of all citizens, seeing them as fellow rational beings in the universal community. He famously wrote, "The primary purpose of a rational being is to live in harmony with other rational beings." Conversely, for a slave, a position of extreme vulnerability and lack of external freedom, Stoicism offered a powerful internal sanctuary. Epictetus, himself a former slave, taught that while one's body and external circumstances might be enslaved, one's inner faculty of choice, one's proherses, remains free and inviolable. No external master can enslave the mind or compel one to be vicious. Epictetus emphasized treating even masters with dignity, not out of fear, but out of recognition of shared humanity. He taught that a slave could still live a virtuous life, demonstrating courage, temperance, and justice, even in chains. This radical assertion of inner freedom and dignity, regardless of external status, was another groundbreaking aspect of Stoic social thought. These principles weren't just theoretical, they were embodied in the lives of prominent Stoics, offering compelling historical anecdotes. Consider Cato the Younger, a staunch Roman senator in the 1st century BCE. Cato was renowned for his unbending adherence to Stoic principles, his integrity, and his fierce commitment to the Roman Republic against the rising tide of authoritarianism represented by Julius Caesar. He consistently chose principles over personal gain, duty over expediency, even when it meant political isolation and ultimately his own demise. He preferred to die by his own hand rather than live under Caesar's tyranny, seeing it as a moral compromise he could not accept. His life and even his death became a potent symbol of unwavering Stoic resolve and duty to the state, even against overwhelming odds. His refusal to compromise his officia serves as a stark, albeit tragic, example of Stoic commitment. Then there is the complex and often tragic relationship between Seneca and the Emperor Nero. Seneca, a prominent Stoic philosopher, orator, and dramatist, served as Nero's tutor and advisor for many years, attempting to guide the young, volatile emperor towards virtuous rule. This was a direct application of the Stoic ideal of the philosopher engaging with power to influence for the common good. Seneca poured out advice on justice, clemency, and self-control, hoping to shape Nero into a wise and just ruler. His essays, like On Clemency, were written specifically for Nero, advocating for a humane and rational approach to governance. However, despite Seneca's efforts, Nero descended into tyranny, eventually compelling Seneca himself to commit suicide. This anecdote highlights the immense challenge and often the limits of Stoic engagement in a corrupt world, demonstrating that while we can control our intentions and efforts, the outcomes are often beyond our control. Yet Seneca's engagement itself, his tireless efforts, stands as a testament to the Stoics' social duty. And of course, Epictetus, whose teachings on treating slaves with dignity provide another powerful example. As we noted, Epictetus himself was born into slavery. His experience shaped his philosophy, particularly his emphasis on the inviolable freedom of the will. He taught his students, many of whom were wealthy and powerful Romans, to recognize the shared humanity of all individuals, regardless of their social rank. He would challenge them, "You are not a master of my will." He urged them to treat their slaves with kindness and respect, not as property, but as fellow rational beings. This wasn't merely a compassionate plea. It was a logical extension of Stoic cosmopolitanism, recognizing the universal spark of reason in everyone. Now, as with any profound philosophy, Stoicism is not without its critics and counterarguments, especially when applied to societal engagement. One common counterargument is, does Stoic detachment sometimes hinder effective emotional connection or advocacy for the oppressed? Critics might argue that by striving for apatheia, freedom from passions, Stoics might appear indifferent to suffering, or might lack the emotional fire necessary to truly empathize with victims of injustice or to passionately advocate for change. If one is truly detached from emotions like anger or deep sorrow, how can one feel the outrage that fuels social movements or connect authentically with the pain of others? Is it possible that the Stoic ideal of reasoned response, while admirable, can sometimes lead to a cold, clinical approach that fails to inspire or mobilize? The Stoic response to this critique would reiterate the distinction between pathé, unhealthy passions, and eupatheia, rational feelings. A Stoic does not aim to be indifferent. They aim to be free from debilitating, irrational emotions that cloud judgment and lead to ineffective action. They would argue that emotional outbursts, while perhaps appearing passionate, can often be counterproductive, leading to burnout, strategic errors, or alienating potential allies. True Stoic compassion is an active benevolence, eudaimonia, a reasoned commitment to alleviate suffering and promote justice. This active benevolence is sustained by reason and virtue, making it a more reliable and enduring force for good than sporadic emotional surges. The Stoic would assert that clarity of mind, unclouded by anger or excessive grief, allows for more effective planning, more resilient action, and a more profound, sustainable commitment to advocacy. They are not advocating for lack of caring, but for care that is wisely directed. A second counterargument concerns the practicality of oikeiosis and cosmopolitanism. Is the expanding circle of concern truly practical in a world defined by tribalism, nationalism, and deep-seated conflict? Critics might argue that the ideal of universal brotherhood, while noble, seems utopian and unrealistic in the face of human nature's darker tendencies toward group identity, us versus them mentalities, and fierce competition for resources or power. How can one genuinely extend the circle of concern to include those who actively seek to harm one's community, or those with whom one has profound, irreconcilable differences? Does such an expansive view dilute local loyalties and make meaningful action less focused? The Stoic response would be that oikeiosis and cosmopolitanism are not descriptions of how humanity currently behaves, but rather a rational ideal and a directive for how we ought to strive to behave. It is a continuous practice, an ongoing effort to recognize shared humanity, even in the face of difference and conflict. It's an acknowledgement of an underlying reality that we are all rational beings sharing a common world, even if our actions often betray that reality. For the Stoic, the fact that something is difficult does not make it any less true or less worthy of pursuit. In a world increasingly interconnected, yet paradoxically fragmented, the call to global citizenship and shared responsibility becomes even more vital. It's a call to find common ground in reason, to seek understanding, and to work towards a koinonia that transcends narrow boundaries, rather than succumbing to tribalism. To deepen our understanding, it's worth cross-referencing Stoic ethics with Kantian ethics, particularly regarding duty and universalizable maxims. Both philosophies place a strong emphasis on reason, duty, and the inherent worth of rational beings. Similarities: emphasis on duty. Both Stoicism and Kantianism foreground duty as the central motivator for moral action. For both, actions are truly moral when performed from duty, not merely in accordance with it. Role of reason: reason is supreme in both systems. Kant's categorical imperative, act only according to that maxim whereby you can at the same time will that it should become a universal law, is a purely rational test for morality. Stoicism likewise grounds virtue and duty in universal reason, logos. Universalizability. The Stoic concept of cosmopolitanism and the expanding circle, leading to duties to all humanity, aligns with Kant's idea of universalizable maxims and treating humanity, whether in oneself or others, always as an end and never merely as a means. Both systems reject arbitrary distinctions based on birth, status, or personal inclination. Inherent worth. Both philosophies argue for the inherent dignity and worth of every rational being, implying a duty to respect others. Differences: grounding of duty. While both emphasize duty, their ultimate grounding differs. Kant's moral law is derived purely from abstract practical reason, entirely independent of empirical desires or inclinations. It is a deontological system. Stoic duty, while rational, is also grounded in physis, nature. Living according to reason is living according to nature, and our social duties arise from our nature as rational, social beings. There's a teleological aspect to Stoicism, aligning with the cosmic design. Role of emotion: as we've discussed, Stoics distinguish between destructive path and healthy eupatheia. While Kant agrees that actions motivated by inclination, even good ones like sympathy, lack full moral worth compared to actions from duty, he is often interpreted as having a more austere view of emotion's role in morality, sometimes seeing it as a distraction rather than a potentially rational guide, eupatheia. For Kant, duty constrains inclination. For the Stoics, reason transforms and harmonizes inclination. The sage versus moral agent. While Kant presents the ideal rational moral agent, the Stoic sage is an almost mythical figure, embodying perfect virtue and wisdom. The path to sagehood is one of continuous effort, with efficia, appropriate actions, serving as steps towards that ideal. Finally, it's worth noting the profound impact of Stoic cosmopolitanism on modern concepts of global citizenship and human rights. The Stoic vision of a single human community, governed by a universal law of reason, where every individual possesses inherent dignity regardless of origin or status, directly prefigures the language and aspirations of international human rights declarations and the ideal of a global society based on shared values. While the practical realization of these ideals remains an ongoing challenge, the Stoic framework provided a philosophical bedrock for such aspirations, reminding us of our interconnectedness and our duties to all fellow inhabitants of this cosmic city. In conclusion, Stoicism is not a philosophy of retreat from the world. On the contrary, it is a philosophy of active, reasoned engagement. Through the lens of oikeiosis, it calls us to expand our circle of concern, recognizing our profound interconnectedness with all humanity. This culminates in the radical vision of cosmopolitanism, urging us to see ourselves as citizens of the world, bound by duties not just to our immediate communities, but to the entire human race. It teaches us to act with justice, to cultivate virtuous friendships, to practice active benevolence rather than debilitating pity, and to confront challenges with reasoned resolve rather than destructive anger. From the self-sacrificing integrity of Cato, to Seneca's ambitious attempts to guide a tyrant, to Epictetus's defiant assertion of inner freedom against external bondage, Stoicism offers a rich tapestry of examples demonstrating how these principles can be lived in the messiness of the real world. It challenges us to fulfill our roles within society with virtue and wisdom, to contribute to the common good, and to always remember that our ultimate loyalty is to the universal community of rational beings. The Stoic ideal, then, is to live in harmony with nature and reason, which fundamentally means living in harmony with other human beings, contributing to their flourishing, and recognizing the profound, undeniable interconnectedness of all. It is a philosophy that equips us not just to survive, but to truly thrive as responsible, engaged citizens of the world. We've journeyed through the core principles of Stoicism, exploring its profound insights into virtue, reason, and our place in the cosmos. But as with any philosophy that spans millennia, Stoicism has gathered its share of misunderstandings, criticisms, and evolving interpretations. As we draw this exploration to a close, it's vital to peel back these layers, confronting the common stereotypes and academic challenges head-on to truly appreciate its enduring, nuanced legacy. Perhaps the most pervasive stereotype of the Stoic is that of the emotionless robot, a rigid, unfeeling individual devoid of passion, indifferent to the joys and sorrows of life. This image, often conjured by the phrase Stoic silence or a stiff upper lip, paints a picture of someone detached from humanity, coldly logical to a fault. But this couldn't be further from the truth of what Stoicism actually prescribes. The ancient Stoics were not advocating for the suppression of emotions, but for their mastery through understanding and reason. They made a crucial distinction between what they called propatheia and pathos. Propatheia refers to the initial, involuntary physiological reactions to events, the quickening of the pulse, the flush of anger, the pang of sorrow. These are natural, automatic responses, and even the Stoic sage would experience them. They are not within our immediate control, and acknowledging them is part of being human. A Stoic would never claim to eliminate these initial impressions. What the Stoics sought to address, however, was pathos, the unhealthy, excessive, and often irrational emotional responses that arise when we assent to mistaken judgments about these initial impressions. When we tell ourselves that a lost possession is terrible, or that someone's insult is unbearable, we transform a neutral event or an initial propatheia into a full-blown pathos, a destructive passion that clouds our judgment and robs us of our tranquility. The goal was not to feel nothing, but to feel appropriately and rationally, to understand that our emotional suffering often stems from our evaluations of events, not the events themselves. To be free for the Stoic was to be free from these enslaving passions. Consider Seneca, one of the most eloquent Roman Stoics. He was certainly not an emotionless robot. In his consolations, particularly to Marcia on the death of her son, or to Polybius on his own grief, he acknowledges the pain of loss. He writes of feeling grief, of the natural human inclination to mourn. He even speaks of weeping, yet his approach is not to wallow or to allow grief to consume him. Instead, he guides the mourner and himself towards a reasoned acceptance, a recognition of life's impermanence, and a focus on gratitude for the time shared. He would argue that to feel no sadness at all upon losing a loved one would be to deny one's humanity, but to allow that sadness to fester into despair or self-pity would be to deny one's reason. He famously wrote, "He who is without sadness, I should say, has never been a man." This is not the voice of someone advocating emotional repression. It is the voice of someone seeking emotional wisdom. The Stoic ideal, the sage, embodies this wisdom, but the Procopton, the aspiring practitioner, is always striving, always learning to navigate this complex emotional landscape. Another common misconception is that Stoicism preaches passivity, an indifferent acceptance of suffering, a withdrawal from the world's problems. This misinterpretation often arises from the Stoic emphasis on accepting what is beyond our control, a principle captured by Amor Fati, the love of fate. But to love one's fate, for a Stoic, is not to shrug one's shoulders in resignation. It is to rationally assent to the unfolding of events in the cosmos, understanding that many things are simply not up to us. However, this does not imply inaction where action is possible and virtuous. In fact, Stoicism is a deeply action-oriented philosophy, rooted in the pursuit of virtue. Justice, courage, temperance, and wisdom are not passive qualities. They demand engagement. The Stoic concept of oikeiosis, or the appropriation of self, suggests an expanding circle of concern, starting with oneself, then family, friends, community, and ultimately all of humanity, a cosmopolitan outlook. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor, embodied this perfectly. He faced plagues, wars, and political turmoil, yet he dedicated his life to serving the Roman Empire, to making just decisions, and to promoting the welfare of his people. He didn't passively accept these challenges. He confronted them with all the virtue and reason he could muster, while simultaneously accepting that certain outcomes were beyond his ultimate control. His meditations are filled with reflections on his duty and his commitment to the common good, not indifference. He actively sought to improve the world within his sphere of influence, precisely because that was the virtuous thing to do. So while Stoics accept the unchangeable, they are fiercely committed to changing what can be changed, particularly their own character and their contributions to the world. Now let's turn to the critiques, historical and modern, that challenge the very foundations and practicality of Stoicism. One of the most persistent criticisms, closely tied to the emotionless robot stereotype, is the accusation of psychological repression. Critics argue that attempting to reason away strong emotions, or to cultivate indifference to externals, is unnatural and psychologically unhealthy. They suggest that such an approach can lead to suppressed feelings festering beneath the surface, eventually erupting in more destructive ways, or leading to a general emotional flatness. This critique often misunderstands the Stoic method. As we discussed, the aim isn't to bottle up emotions, but to reframe the judgments that give rise to them. It's not about forcing a feeling away, but about challenging the underlying irrational belief. If I believe losing my job is the worst thing that could possibly happen, my emotional response will be one of catastrophic despair. A Stoic would challenge that belief. Is it truly the worst? Is it not an opportunity for something new? Is my value as a person tied to this job? This is cognitive restructuring, not repression. However, the line can be thin, especially for those who misinterpret Stoicism as simply "don't feel bad." In practice, an individual might try to simply dismiss their feelings without truly addressing the underlying judgments, leading to a superficial suppression. This isn't a flaw in Stoicism itself, but in its misapplication. The philosophy demands deep self-reflection and rigorous intellectual work, not just a shallow adherence to catchphrases. Another practical challenge arises in extreme situations. Is it truly possible to maintain Stoic equanimity in the face of torture, profound personal loss, or unimaginable trauma? Critics argue that such scenarios render Stoicism impractical, demanding a superhuman level of emotional control that simply isn't realistic for most people, if anyone. While the Stoics did indeed advocate for preparing the mind for adversity, a practice known as premeditatio malorum, or the premeditation of evils, they didn't promise immunity from pain or suffering. Instead, they offered a framework for responding to it with resilience and dignity. Consider the powerful example of Viktor Frankl, a Jewish psychiatrist who survived the Nazi concentration camps. While not a Stoic in the ancient sense, his logotherapy, and indeed his very survival, are deeply resonant with Stoic principles. Frankl observed that even in the most dehumanizing conditions, where everything external was stripped away, some individuals managed to find meaning and purpose. He famously stated, "Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way." This is the ultimate Stoic freedom. The freedom to choose your inner response, even when external circumstances are utterly horrific. It doesn't deny the horror or the pain, but it asserts the inviolable inner sanctuary of the human spirit. While perhaps not achieving complete apatheia, individuals like Frankl demonstrated an extraordinary capacity for reasoned endurance and meaning-making even in hellish conditions, illustrating the enduring power of cultivating one's inner fortress. Then there's the charge of elitism. Historically, many prominent Stoics were well-educated, influential men like Seneca, a wealthy advisor, or Marcus Aurelius, an emperor. While Epictetus, a former slave, offers a powerful counterexample, critics argue that the time and intellectual effort required for Stoic practice might make it inherently inaccessible to those struggling with basic survival or lacking educational opportunities. If virtue is the sole good and wisdom the path, how can someone preoccupied with finding their next meal devote themselves to rigorous philosophical contemplation? However, the Stoic counterargument is powerful. The philosophy focuses on what is within our control, and that applies universally. Inner freedom, moral choice, and the ability to assent to impressions are not privileges of wealth or status. Epictetus, in his humble circumstances as a freed slave teaching from a small room, demonstrated that philosophical wisdom is available to anyone willing to pursue it, regardless of their external conditions. In fact, he argued that poverty and hardship could even be advantages in developing resilience and virtue, by stripping away distractions and forcing a focus on what truly matters. The freedom he spoke of was not political or economic, but internal, a freedom of the mind. Another critique, sometimes intertwined with the emotionless one, is a perceived lack of warmth or empathy. If a Stoic aims to remain undisturbed by external events, does this extend to the suffering of others? Does cultivating detachment lead to a cold, aloof demeanor, an inability to genuinely connect or commiserate? Again, this is a misreading. As we touched upon with Oikeosis, Stoicism is profoundly social. It views humanity as interconnected, part of a larger cosmic community. To act virtuously is to act with justice, kindness, and benevolence towards others. A Stoic's empathy might not manifest as overt emotional display or sentimentality, but rather as a reasoned commitment to alleviate suffering where possible, to act with compassion, and to fulfill one's duties to fellow human beings. Seneca, in his letters, repeatedly advises on acts of kindness and generosity. Marcus Aurelius emphasized our shared humanity and the importance of working together for the common good. Their concern for others was not based on being overwhelmed by shared emotions, but on a reasoned understanding of our interdependence and the moral imperative to contribute positively to the human community. It's a robust, active form of empathy, rather than a passive, purely emotive one. Perhaps one of the most intellectually stimulating critiques comes from Friedrich Nietzsche. Nietzsche, a profoundly influential 19th-century German philosopher, saw Stoicism as a philosophical illness, a denial of life's inherent vitality and struggle. For Nietzsche, life was characterized by the will to power, a fundamental drive not just for survival, but for growth, for overcoming, for self-mastery, and the creation of one's own values. He believed Stoicism, with its emphasis on reason's control over passions and its acceptance of fate, represented a kind of self-denial, a weakening of this vital force. Nietzsche viewed the Stoic ideal of the sage, who achieves tranquility through rational control and acceptance of the cosmic order, as an attempt to escape the messy, painful, and glorious realities of existence. He critiqued what he perceived as the Stoics' tyranny of reason, arguing that it sought to suppress the very instincts and passions that give life its richness, its danger, and its creative potential. Where Stoics sought peace through alignment with universal reason, Nietzsche saw them as imposing their own rational structures onto a chaotic, amoral universe, thereby domesticating life. For him, the Stoic amor fati, the acceptance of destiny, was a form of resignation, a reaction of a spirit that couldn't truly affirm life with all its suffering and contradictions. Nietzsche's own version of amor fati was quite different. It was an active, joyous love of one's fate, willing it to be exactly as it was, even the most painful parts, not merely as something to be endured, but as something to be embraced and celebrated as essential to one's becoming. He urged individuals to be creators of their own values, to live dangerously, to embrace the Dionysian aspects of life, chaos, passion, ecstasy, alongside the Apollonian order, reason, form. In this light, Stoicism, with its emphasis on aligning with nature's reason, seemed to Nietzsche to be a path of retreat, a comfort for those unwilling to confront the terrifying freedom and responsibility of creating meaning in a godless world. He might have seen the Stoic ideal as too neatly ordered, too harmonious, too willing to find solace in a pre-existing cosmic reason rather than forging one's own path through a vibrant, often contradictory reality. This leads us to another significant philosophical challenge, particularly from existentialism. Philosophers like Jean-Paul Sartre and Albert Camus, prominent figures in the 20th century, championed radical freedom, individual responsibility, and the inherent absurdity of existence without a preordained meaning or divine plan. From this perspective, Stoicism's embrace of a rational cosmic order, logos, and a deterministic fate seems to directly contradict the existentialist insistence on human beings being condemned to be free, responsible for creating their own values and meaning in a meaningless universe. Sartre, for instance, would argue that the Stoic notion of aligning oneself with nature or reason is an act of bad faith, a denial of our fundamental freedom and the responsibility that comes with it. We are not merely passive recipients of a cosmic plan, we are active choosers, constantly defining ourselves through our actions and decisions. To say, "this is fate, so I must accept it," would be, for an existentialist, an evasion of our radical freedom to choose our attitude, yes, but also to rebel, to create, to forge a path against what seems destined. Camus, with his myth of Sisyphus, suggested that meaning is found not in avoiding the absurd, but in defiantly embracing it and rebelling against it. The Stoic response, however, highlights where their locus of freedom lies. While they believe external events are largely determined by cosmic logos, fate, they assert that our freedom lies precisely in our ability to choose our inner response, our judgments, and our assent to impressions. Epictetus, a former slave, knew intimately the experience of external unfreedom, yet he proclaimed, "No man is free who is not master of himself." This inner mastery, this control over our faculty of judgment and choice is for the Stoics the ultimate freedom, inviolable by any external force. We are not free to change the past or control the future, but we are profoundly free in how we choose to live this moment, how we interpret our experiences, and how we react to the world. This is not a denial of freedom, but a very specific and profound definition of it, allowing for dignity and agency even in the most constrained circumstances. Despite these formidable critiques, Stoicism's influence on Western thought has been profound and surprisingly diverse, demonstrating its enduring power to shape ethical and psychological frameworks. Its legacy ripples through centuries, finding resonance in unexpected places. In the Enlightenment, for instance, the Stoic emphasis on reason and natural law deeply impacted philosophers like Baruch Spinoza and René Descartes. Spinoza, a 17th-century Dutch philosopher, crafted an ethical system in his ethics that is strikingly Stoic in its ambition. He sought freedom through the rational understanding of the universe and its causal necessity. Like the Stoics, Spinoza believed that emotions, which he called passions, arise from inadequate understanding, and that true freedom comes from understanding the deterministic nature of all things, a concept very close to the Stoic logos and fate. By understanding the causes of our emotions, we can transform them from passive sufferings into active states of mind, ultimately finding joy in the intellectual love of God or nature. His aim was not to deny emotions, but to conquer them by understanding them, allowing reason to guide us to tranquility, very much a Stoic goal. Descartes, too, though often remembered for his mind-body dualism, showed significant Stoic influence in his work Passions of the Soul. He also aimed to understand and regulate emotions through the application of reason. While his metaphysics differed, his practical approach to achieving inner tranquility through rational control over one's thoughts and reactions bears a clear Stoic stamp. Both Spinoza and Descartes, in their own unique ways, wrestled with the Stoic ideal of human freedom, attained through rational self-mastery and an understanding of the natural order. Even early Christian thinkers, perhaps surprisingly given the theological differences, found common ground with Stoic philosophy. St. Augustine, one of the most pivotal figures in early Christianity, while ultimately building a system centered on God's grace, wrestled deeply with Stoic ideas. His philosophical journey involved grappling with questions of moral responsibility, the nature of evil, and the struggle against sinful passions. The Stoic emphasis on virtue, self-control, and the internal struggle against vice resonated with his own spiritual quest. Stoic ethical concepts provided a philosophical language and framework for understanding the human condition, even as he ultimately sought a divine, rather than purely rational solution to human failings. The Stoic focus on inner moral life and character, as opposed to external rituals, found echoes in Christian ethics. Furthermore, Stoic logic and epistemology had a significant, albeit often unacknowledged, influence on early Christian patristic thought, providing tools for theological reasoning. But perhaps nowhere is Stoicism's modern influence more evident than in the field of psychology, particularly in the development of cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, and rational emotive behavior therapy, REBT. The core tenet of both these highly effective therapeutic approaches is fundamentally Stoic. It's not events themselves that disturb us, but our interpretation or judgment of those events. Epictetus's famous dictum, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters," could well serve as the motto for CBT. Therapists employing CBT help patients identify cognitive distortions, irrational or unhelpful ways of thinking, and challenge them, leading to a reframing of thoughts and a healthier emotional response. This is precisely what Stoics aim to do through careful examination of their impressions and judgments. Albert Ellis, the founder of REBT, openly acknowledged his debt to Stoicism. His ABC model of psychological distress, activating event, belief, consequence, is a direct, modern articulation of Stoic principles. Ellis argued that it's not the activating event, A, that directly causes our emotional consequence, C, but our beliefs, B, about that event. By identifying and vigorously disputing irrational beliefs, individuals can transform unhealthy negative emotions into healthy ones. Ellis, much like a Stoic philosopher engaging a student, would directly challenge a patient's faulty logic and irrational demands on the world, guiding them towards a more rational and tranquil perspective. Another profound connection can be drawn to Viktor Frankl's logotherapy, mentioned earlier. Though developed from his harrowing experiences in the concentration camps, Frankl's central tenet, the search for meaning as the primary human motivation, and the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given circumstance, is deeply aligned with Stoic ideas of internal freedom and resilience. Frankl's work powerfully illustrates that even when stripped of everything external, our internal capacity for choice and meaning-making remains inviolable, a testament to the Stoic ideal of an inner citadel that cannot be breached by external adversity. Beyond clinical psychology, Stoicism has seen a significant resurgence in broader self-help, leadership, and resilience training circles. In an increasingly complex, uncertain, and information-saturated world, its practical wisdom offers tangible tools for navigating chaos and cultivating inner strength. The digital age, with its constant demands, anxieties, and comparison traps, makes the Stoic emphasis on focusing on what's within our control, practicing mindfulness, attention to impressions, and distinguishing true value from fleeting externals incredibly appealing. Examples abound. Entrepreneurs and tech leaders in Silicon Valley, such as Tim Ferriss, have openly championed Stoicism as a framework for decision-making, managing stress, and maintaining focus amidst high pressure. Military leaders and special forces units have long recognized the value of Stoic principles for developing discipline, mental fortitude, and composure in extreme conditions. The premeditatio malorum becomes a strategy for anticipating worst-case scenarios and preparing one's mind, not to avoid fear, but to act courageously despite it. Consider how Stoic advice helps with modern burnout. In a culture that often equates self-worth with productivity and external achievements, Stoicism reminds us to distinguish between what is truly up to us, our effort, our character, our response to demands, and what is not: company policies, market fluctuations, the expectations of others. It teaches us the virtue of setting boundaries, accepting our limitations, and focusing on performing our duties with excellence, regardless of the outcome, thereby freeing us from the debilitating anxiety of striving for things ultimately beyond our control. This shift in perspective can transform a feeling of overwhelm into a sense of purposeful action and acceptance. Similarly, for managing anxiety in daily life, cognitive reframing, consciously choosing to view a challenging situation as an opportunity for growth rather than a threat, is a direct application of Stoic wisdom. The practice of focusing on the present moment, on the tasks at hand, and on what we can do, instead of spiraling into worry about an uncertain future, is a powerful antidote to modern anxieties, allowing us to reclaim our mental tranquility. However, this popular resurgence also raises some important counterarguments and questions. Has modern Stoicism, in its widespread adoption, diluted its philosophical depth? Many contemporary interpretations tend to focus almost exclusively on the practical life hacks, the techniques for emotional regulation and resilience, without delving into the intricate metaphysical and ethical framework that underpins ancient Stoicism. When stripped of its cosmic logos, its pantheistic view of God/nature, its intricate physics, and its rigorous logic, is it still truly Stoicism, or merely a collection of useful psychological strategies? This leads to the crucial question: can Stoicism be effectively practiced without its underlying metaphysical framework? For the ancient Stoics, their ethics were inextricably linked to their physics, their understanding of the universe, and their logic, their method of reasoning. Living according to nature meant aligning one's reason with the universal reason, the logos, that pervades and orders the cosmos. This gave their ethical prescriptions a profound meaning and justification. Virtue was the sole good not merely because it led to tranquility, but because it was the only thing truly in harmony with the rational order of the universe, and thus with human nature. If one discards this cosmic context, if one doesn't believe in a rational, provident universe, does the injunction to live virtuously lose its ultimate ground? Does it become merely a subjective choice, a preference for a certain psychological state, rather than an objective path to eudaimonia, human flourishing? Some argue that without the metaphysical scaffolding, modern Stoicism risks becoming just another self-help trend, powerful in its utility, but lacking the profound philosophical coherence and existential meaning that made it so compelling for the ancients. Yet others contend that the practical benefits stand on their own. The techniques for emotional mastery and resilience are valuable regardless of one's cosmic beliefs, and the ethos of self-control and virtue transcends specific metaphysical doctrines. Perhaps, they argue, Stoicism's adaptability is precisely its strength, that its core insights can be harvested and applied even by those who don't subscribe to its ancient cosmology. As we consider Stoicism's enduring appeal and its place in contemporary thought, it's illuminating to briefly cross-reference it with similar themes in Eastern philosophies. Traditions like Buddhism and Taoism also emphasize emotional mastery, acceptance, and finding peace amidst change. Buddhism, for instance, teaches detachment from desires and attachments as a path to ending suffering, and mindfulness as a means of understanding the impermanent nature of reality. Taoism advocates for living in harmony with the Tao, accepting the natural flow of things, and practicing wu-wei, non-action in the sense of effortless alignment with nature. These parallels are striking. All three traditions, in their distinct ways, point towards an inner freedom achieved through a transformation of perspective and a cultivated acceptance of reality. They all seek to liberate the individual from suffering caused by resistance to the way things are. However, Stoicism offers a distinct Western path. It is deeply rooted in Greek rationalism, emphasizing the active application of reason to understand and shape one's inner world. It advocates for active civic engagement and participation in the human community, driven by a robust ethical system where virtue is not just a means to an end, but the supreme good in itself. Unlike some Eastern traditions that might prioritize enlightenment or liberation from the cycle of rebirth, Stoicism seeks eudaimonia, human flourishing, within this life, within the existing world, through a reasoned and virtuous engagement with it. It's a path to inner freedom that empowers the individual to face the world with courage, wisdom, and tranquility, not by withdrawing from it, but by mastering one's response to it. In conclusion, Stoicism is far more than the stiff upper lip stereotype. It is a nuanced, profound, and intensely practical philosophy that has withstood the test of time, inspiring thinkers, leaders, and countless individuals seeking meaning and resilience. Its critiques, from Nietzsche's passionate rejection to existentialism's challenge of radical freedom, only serve to highlight its intellectual robustness and its capacity to provoke deep philosophical debate. Its enduring legacy, evident in modern psychology and its resurgence in self-help and leadership, testifies to its timeless wisdom. Despite the ongoing discussions about its metaphysical foundations and the potential for dilution in popular culture, the core message of Stoicism remains profoundly relevant. True freedom lies within. It is found not in controlling external events, but in mastering our own judgments, cultivating virtue, and responding to life's inevitable challenges with reason, dignity, and an unwavering commitment to what is good and true. Stoicism continues to offer a powerful framework for cultivating inner peace, resilience, and a virtuous existence in an often chaotic and uncertain world, standing as a testament to the enduring human quest for wisdom and inner freedom.